so I just turn this one on to both of them. Okay. Good evening, everybody. We'll go ahead and call this board meeting of the Paducah Independent Board of Education to order. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Dr. Koji?
Here.
Ms. Hancock?
Here.
Ms. Howard?
Here.
Dr. Hudson?
Here.
Dr. Levin?
Here. Have we established a quorum?
Yes, we have.
Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda with one minor correction? There's a typographical error on item 6.2, which should read 2020-2021 school year instead of 2021-2022. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda with the correction to the typographical error.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Are there any questions from the board? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Koji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levin?
Yes. If everyone would please stand. Dr. Shively, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item is Superintendent's Report, item 3.1, Student Achievement. Will Black, Assistant Superintendent.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Tonight, I want to provide a little bit more detail in terms of our longer-term response to COVID learning loss in our district, and in particular, what we plan to do really starting this summer and then going into the next few years. The reality and what most experts say around the country is that it could take up to 3 years or more to completely catch up students from what they missed during the pandemic. And this is certainly something that's unprecedented in our country on this scale, but it has happened before. And one example, is on a smaller scale, was Hurricane Katrina. And so when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, there were students a large number of students actually, who did not go to school for between 6 months to an entire year of school. And so there are lessons to learn from Katrina. There's lessons to learn from research. And we've been partnering with a national consulting group. It's actually a nonprofit group to really learn learn about that research and learn about the best practices for overcoming this kind of academic deficit on this scale. So tonight I want to share that with you and share our thinking moving forward as a district. We have engaged a lot of administrators and teachers on this. We've actually invited them to some information sessions and some things where they can learn about this research. Again, it's just dipping our toe in. We haven't shared this with every single staff member yet because we wanted to make sure that this was going to be worth our while. But now that we've had a chance to dig into it, we really like the approach. And I think, in fact, as we began to dig into it around the state and around the country, people kind of picked up on this. And so there's actually kind of a lot of momentum toward this research. So I want to start with sharing what is really considered the traditional approach to remediating learning when a student falls behind. And these things are actually pretty common. You may have heard them either in your lifetime or maybe you've heard it from other parents or from teachers. And one quote that I've heard throughout my career is, we really need to meet students where they are and then move forward from there, which actually that makes sense intuitively. Another one, let's start with the content they missed and we'll fill the gaps and move forward, right? So moving step by step from let's figure out where they are, and we're going to move them sequentially forward until we catch them up. The last one, let's focus on prerequisites that students haven't mastered, and then hopefully we'll get to the grade level content in time. All well-meaning approaches, some of which are research-based. I mean, in fact, there is truth in that. There are some things you have to learn first before you do a more advanced skill. But in some cases, it's not quite that simple. And in some cases, what they've realized through some research is that actually it's not always true that you have to learn all the prerequisites before you can go on to the grade level content. So in 2018, well before the pandemic started, the nonprofit group TNTP, formerly known as the New Teacher Project, published a study called The Opportunity Myth. And actually, we took a small group to WKEC, the co-op, to actually go over the study. And at the time, it was very engaging. But, a lot of it, I remember I actually saved it to my computer. I even went back and read it a couple of times. And there were things I was talking about in reference to this study, even before the pandemic started. But when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden this study took on new meaning. What it emphasizes is that it's basically a study that this group did in multiple districts across the United States, districts with different demographics, with different, in different locations, some urban, some more rural. And in these districts, they noticed that, they noticed a pattern that if students had these 4 key resources present in their instruction, they tended to score better and do better on grade level assignments. Okay, in other words, they tended to learn more. They were more advanced in their learning if they had access to these 4 resources. And they are access to grade appropriate assignments, even if they're multiple grade levels behind, still making sure there's a priority on grade appropriate assignments. Strong instruction, which means, best practices using most up-to-date research and pedagogy. And then deep engagement, meaning that the kids were actively engaged in the learning, not sitting passively. And where the kids are, involved in even asking questions, leading discussions, doing activities where they're personally involved. And then last, teachers with high expectations, meaning that the teachers believe and void, in other words, even when interviewed, the teacher was sure that they could catch up this group of students in the course of, let's say, just a year, even though they were behind it. In other words, that it was important and a priority to get the kids to the grade level expectations. If kids had those 4 resources present in their learning environment, they did better on average than the students who did not. In fact, significantly better. So, knowing that, how do we go about finding the most efficient path to proficiency for our kids, given the fact that we have a number of students who did not participate fully in instruction all year? That number, that's the most extreme case. We have a number of students who participated, maybe they didn't complete all their work. In other words, they failed some classes, but they didn't, it wasn't a total failure. They did learn, various concepts. We have other students who have barely participated at all. And again, that's a smaller group, but they do exist. This is despite our best efforts. I mean, teachers, people going out to homes, making sure they have internet, making sure they have a computer, helping them get on there, setting goals, going back, checking in, lots of work on the part of the teacher. But due to the pandemic, due to the, to the inability to have them in the building, how how do we find the most efficient path back to grade level without having to completely redo the whole year? And so what we've done, in light of what TNTP has done, is published a study, not a study, a guide, based on that opportunity to study on how you might go about doing that. And so what we know from Katrina is that the schools that went back and just redid all the grade level, the content that the kids missed, that group of students learned less. It's very clear. In fact, there were charter schools that almost lost their charter based on that. They went back after, the year after, when the kids came back, they went back, started where they left off, and basically said, we're going to move the kids, fast as we can forward without a strategy for accelerating that learning, for trying to squeeze, 2 years in one, or as close to 2 years in one as we can get. In other words, prioritizing the content that we really need to cover from last year so that we can get to the grade level content this year. And that's what TNTP has suggested, that we follow this model. Now, then we're going to be much more successful if we use the approach of starting with the grade level content, meaning, so next year, you're in 4th grade this year, you go to 5th grade, but there are some gaps in your learning, that we're going to start with a 5th grade material and work backwards. So we're going to assume we want to get you here to where you're, solving word problems involving different operations with fractions. Well, we're going to have to go back to 4th grade and think, okay, what did you miss that we need to teach you in order for you to do the 5th grade skill? Okay, that's different than saying, well, let's go back and teach you all the 4th grade skills involving fractions, and then we'll teach you all the 5th grade skills. But instead, what we would do is we look at that 5th grade skill, and then we go back and say, what are they missing in order to get to here? And what we would do is the approach, and I'm oversimplifying it a little bit, but the approach is to fill learning gaps strategically right before you teach it. And so we're doing that in a systemic way, in a systematic way, where you're getting data on where kids are before you start the unit, and filling the gaps, and then teaching the content, and staying with that, keeping that focus on the current grade level. So the 5th grade level concepts, and using that example. So with this approach, we shared this research with teachers. There's lots of excitement from those teachers about this. It makes sense to them. But the number one question that I'm getting from teachers is, okay, but what does that look like, and how are we going to get ready for this? Because this is going to radically change how I teach. I mean, I don't study prerequisites on that level, because they normally walk in a predictable fashion where I know certain gaps are going to occur. Now, those assumptions are all invalid because we have COVID. We have all these we have extra learning gaps now. And so they're saying, so what does it look like? What is the professional development going to be? What do we need to learn in order to do this? All good questions. So what does our district actually need to accomplish this goal? Well, there are two main things. Actually, there's three, but I'm going to start with two first. The first is professional development. And what we are up against is a pretty serious task. It involves teachers going through their curriculum and backwards mapping from that objective back to the previous grade level objective, the prerequisite objectives that would lead to that. So I gave you the example of fractions. Another example might be in science. If you're learning about ecosystems in 6th grade, there are 5th grade versions of ecosystems that you normally walk into, or 4th grade versions that you walk into school with. And in those cases, we need to figure out what was it that they were supposed to learn so that we incorporate the right things that they need to know to do it. Where we see this, really being challenging is in math, because math, in reading, the content spirals a little more. In math, there are some things you just have to know in order to understand the next step. So that's where a lot of strategy is going to occur, but that's also true when you get into AP, when you get into high school career courses. When you get into, you know, every course is going to have this on some level. So for professional development, we really need time for teachers to learn about opportunity myth and the learning acceleration model, to learn the research on what actually works so they understand it. Then they need time, once they understand what it looks like, time to prioritize objectives. And I will say, let me back up, in terms of learning the model, we all, you know, last year we were able to learn very quickly how to facilitate a classroom virtually using Microsoft Teams. That was a huge learning curve for teachers. We actually engaged a whole team of expert, you know, effective teachers on how to do that. And that group came up with some excellent models for teachers, like examples of how this might look, or examples of how to do it. And they helped us with a variety of workshops. We would do the same thing here. We're not just engaging TNTP and learning the research, but then having teachers all ready to go, having worked over the summer to have examples of what it looks like in their content. And then looking at time to prioritize objectives where each teacher can take time to go back and figure out which objectives from the previous grade level are the most important. Because the truth is, and the research would show this, we can't teach everything from the previous year. You can't teach all the fourth grade objectives and all the fifth grade objectives in the same year. There's a reason why they're spread out over 2 years, but we could prioritize the most important fourth grade objectives and then build to that fifth grade. And so that is going to take probably the bulk of the time. Then time to plan the units and lessons so that, you know, teachers are basically going to be teaching prerequisite skills that they don't always teach on a regular basis. They often do teach it though in our RTI setting, so even the core teachers involved in that. So it won't be totally new, but they will need to plan out, how am I going to do it, when am I going to do it? And then we need to, the last part with professional development is an ongoing process where we're supporting teachers and we're ensuring that we have adequate monitoring and feedback for them through the year, so that we're doing walkthroughs, that we're thoughtfully supporting them, where we're helping them troubleshoot, again, just to accelerate their ability to execute the model. So the second set of things that we're looking at is making sure we have access to the best teaching tools. Sometimes technology, a good program, can really help you accelerate learning. And so we've done some research on that, and that will continue. So that we can make sure that we start the year, or at least as we go forward in the next couple of years, that we're making sure teachers have the best tools in their hands. And then, again, to make sure that in each subject that we're teaching, that the teacher knows and is executing the best practices for teaching that subject. And that's, of course, something we do all the time, but we would continue that. And so, to wrap up, that's the vision. These are some key resources that, you know, that we will need. The first one's not listed, and that is time. You know, how do we provide the time that is needed to get teachers ready for this? And I'm not, you know, there's a variety of ways to go about it. I know Mr. Brock is going to be presenting an alternative calendar. It's not the only way to do it, but it's one approach. We've talked through some other possibilities, but there's not going to be a shortcut around the time needed. And I'm just being, I wouldn't be fully transparent and honest with you if I didn't say, this is a pretty big transition for teachers. I mean, this is a lot of thinking and processing, learning, and then applying. And so the time's going to be key. The other part that we're going to need, we are going to need some thought partners, some consultants, and we've been talking with the New Teacher Project, as well as a group we've already worked with this year called Ed Connected, and they do virtual coaching to help us extend our ability to support teachers in the actual classroom. They have a cool model that makes it cheaper to get consultants to come in and coach, because they do it virtually. Even though the teacher might be in person, the coach is operating virtually. And so it really cuts down on some costs. But we tested it this year and got some very positive feedback on it. So it helps us, be able to extend our support at an effective price. And then there are 3 new district positions that are coming up. And by the way, and Dr. Shadley can talk about this, in all 3 of these cases, what makes this possible, it's not only the need, this extreme need that we have, but also, federal funds, the ESSER funds, help us to put some of this in place. The first is Chief Equity Officer, whose job is definitely bigger than just the learning acceleration part of it, but that would be part of it. In other words, we want that person to help us be able to walk through classrooms with an equity lens. So as they're watching, they're thinking about, is this instruction equitable? Are we teaching at grade level content or grade level appropriate assignments? Are we bridging the gap to the prerequisites appropriately? Do we have high expectations? Are we building good relationships? And the whole team would be doing that, but the Chief Equity Officer would really be looking at the equity issues and through that equity lens. District Instructional Specialist is kind of an administrative leader, coach of an instructional team that would help us do walkthroughs, help me. They would work directly with me to try to provide principals and assistant principals more support in terms of monitoring how we are executing on this and giving, and it would be in partnership with principals and assistant principals so that that person as well as the equity officer and also the district instructional coach are all together doing systematic walkthroughs of the whole district in partnership and along with the principals and any instructional coaches in the building. So the last is an instructional coach that would be someone who is really gifted in helping teachers, troubleshooting, knowledgeable in troubleshooting best practices or problems in the classroom too, just like the instructional specialist would, and they would all work together as a district instructional team. The Chief Equity Officer, I just want to clarify, would definitely have other roles that are outside of this. That's a cabinet level position. So we're just trying, in a small district, we all work together. People have multiple roles. Just like a lot of people in my job don't sit in PLCs directly. In a bigger district, you wouldn't go to a school PLC. In our district, I do. And I'm happy I love that opportunity. So same with the Chief Equity Officer and other roles, we're going to share responsibilities there to make sure we're working together the way we should. And so I just want to explain that all of this is an effort to address the needs of teachers who are trying to address the needs of students. And if we're going to be successful and get the bang for our buck, there's really no shortcut around time and support, having the right supports in place. So,
I have a question.
Questions,
Will
yeah.
you implement this at all grade levels? I mean, I just wonder, kids that are entering first grade would not have as big a gap as some of the higher grades. I don't know.
That's a great question. In fact, we've talked about that over the course, even with, we haven't officially started with any consulting group yet or signed a contract, but we have, just in our initial discussions, these are questions that I was able to bring up. And so for instance, in what cases is it appropriate for a kid to repeat the entire year? And, for instance, with, the legislature passing that option, or, it brings that question up. Well, we would engage with that consulting group. And the answer is, it depends, probably. There are cases where that would be appropriate. But we want to be careful about making the assumption that the only way forward is to redo the whole year. That is not true. And in other words, there are ways to catch up, having missed a significant amount. But we want to make sure that we've thought through, where is it going to take more time or more intervention, let's say, and where is it not? And it's okay to go ahead and move forward. And like I said, I think not all subjects are created equal here. Like in some, there's more spiraling of objectives, so you can kind of pick up what's missed as you're teaching the new objectives. In other subjects, it may require some more intensive intervention that requires more time in school. So it's a great question, and it's one that we need to think through pretty carefully. Yes, sir.
Well, I have a question.
Dr. Coach, would you use your microphone, please?
Oh.
Thank you.
I have a question. Some parents are thinking of holding back their children. What provisions are you making for that? For example, let's say in the third grade, you have about half of the parents wanting to hold back the.
So I don't think that the number is that high yet, thankfully. There are a handful. If there are people who choose that, we would, well, and again, there's a lot to that. I'll let Dr. Schlave talk about that because that is not a policy that's already in place. And so you want to address that before I get into it?
Yes, that's the Senate Bill 128, the supplemental school year program, which is just a little background information. Children have to ask for that, or their parents' guardians have to ask for that by May 1 in writing. The Board of Education locally across the Commonwealth has until June 1 to make a decision. And it's an all or none implementation on that. And so in the front end of this, we did a survey before spring break. We had a 40% return rate, which is really good for a survey. And,
By all in one, you mean you have to offer it at every grade level?
yes, if you offer it, you have to you can't pick and choose and say this child can, this child cannot. It is the Attorney General's opinion in the Commonwealth of Kentucky for a couple, maybe 3 decades now is it's a school decision, K-8, whether you hold a child back or not. For this year, this supplemental school year program would allow the parents to do that if this local district chooses to provide that option. If you provide that option for one child, you provide that option for all 3,000 children. And so just trying to get an idea on the front end before we even got to this point, our survey results showed about 13% across the district, which is right at 150 children. I requested that 11 of them were seniors. We looked at that, Mrs. Teague and I talked about that multiple times today, but we looked at that. Roughly 20 students or families communicated to us on behalf of students for McNabb Elementary, right at the same. At Morgan, Clark was closer to 25. We were mid-30s at Paducah Middle School and right at 50 at the high school. And so with that, there's a couple of different nuances when you get to the high school level because you have different pieces with different, for example, if you're an athlete, you have the NCAA clearinghouse version of what you can do if you're a already graduating senior, and how those grades count. There's also the Kentucky Higher Education Association that governs the KEYS money, and also the dual scholarship reduced cost your junior and senior year. They have a little bit of different interpretation on it, and so most of the repeat year is left up, or the supplemental school year program is left up to local decisions or local school districts to make the decision. And so you either retake the class or you take something that is closely connected to that class. And so K-8, if you repeat that, it makes sense that you just repeat that grade level. When you get to high school and start looking at a credit-based system, and you've already passed an English class, for example, if you passed English 10, that's a local decision. Is that closely connected enough to English 11 that you move on to English 11, or is that something we say, no, you're going to have to repeat English 10? And so we have until June 1st, I guess, to make that decision as a school board, and then we will have to work with our different site-based councils on what that looks like when it's implemented, if we so choose to make that decision. If that answers your question. Dr. Coach?
Yes.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I have one question. Elementary schools, how many teachers do you have district-wide altogether?
Elementary? That's a good question. You know that off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, I would guess we're about 250, multiply this out, probably around 80 to 85 counting Title I instructors.
Let me tell you the reason I was asking, because this is going to be major for teachers. A lot of a lot of things to do, a lot of assignments to handle all at the same time. The district instructional coach, why not have one at the high school level and one at the elementary level?
Good question. The thought here was to try to, well, let me say two things. First, we were hoping to make it an aligned team that would be at the district level that we could allocate to where we need it. Like, so if we're struggling at a certain level, that we could send that team there or individuals from that team. However, what we're hoping for is that we're going to be able to, and we don't have total control over this, but we're hoping to get a variety of experiences here in this team to where we can play to people's strengths. So for instance, if they were, some may be already a high school coach or an elementary coach, what we really want is to be able to leverage the team across the district, but then allow them to specialize if they need to. So if there's somebody who's really good with middle school and that's a place where we really need time, that person may spend extra time there. Okay, if there's a person who's more elementary, we can give them more time in the elementary school. It allows us to be more flexible in that way. Anything else you want to add?
No, that was the, I think you said it very well. The idea is to work collaboratively together. I would say add to, on the teacher coach that we're looking at, we're definitely wanting a strong technology background for integration of technology and troubleshooting that. And so in our discussions, that's where we got to. It's April, so that doesn't mean we can't add that if that's a need going forward. With that, we're also trying to, the ESSER 2 funds, which is for us about $4.9 billion. We've gone through the funding matrix between Mr. Black, Ms. Copeland, and I, and have over 95% of that in the matrix to direct student services as defined by the Kentucky Department of Education. That will generate, we believe, to be an extra $150,000 of ESSER 2 money because it hits the 85% threshold that KDE asked us to, so they held back some money and are kind of rewarding school districts for doing that. So there is some possibilities that are moving forward with that. And what we see is there are going to be needs for RTI at different levels. I think a lot at middle school with what our current staffing is, and maybe additional with the high school math specific. And so right now it's here's what we think we need at the moment, but it's definitely worth us talking through and looking at implementing.
Yes. We're certainly open to talking more about exactly what it would look like.
Yeah, I just see, elementary teachers, they have all the disciplines to teach at one time, and I just, how to master that, I just would wonder if it's going to be overwhelming if you just had one coach, but if you had one coach, you can focus at elementary by itself.
It's an interesting thought. I mean, we can definitely talk through the logistics of that and or how to make, what exactly it would look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if y'all are finished with questions, but
No,
go ahead.
Yeah, my last question was not fully, answered. Considering, if you decide to accept students repeating classes, are you looking at class sizes? What plans do you have for the class sizes?
Absolutely, we will look at that, and that's why I want to do survey data on the front end for just to have a general idea. Obviously, we have to do the formal application process that I hope to get out tomorrow for the May 1 deadline. And so, yes, all that would go into our consideration. On the survey side of that, what I saw was some of those key transition points where you have some bigger classes, and there's some classes that are 225 students in that grade level, and some are 200. What I saw on the survey data didn't look like it would strain that, but if it did, if it required an additional teacher at 3rd grade at X Elementary School, then we would have to be committed to allocating that resource to them based on that. Those students are counted in the SEEK, so they would not, they would count as an additional child for full-time equivalency. And so we have staffing numbers, our ratios are 1 to 24 at K3, we're 28 in 4th grade, and 5th and 6th are 1 to 29, and then we're 31 and up 7th grade through 12th grade. Saying that, our traditional class sizes our elementaries are normally around less than 21 or 20, 21 to 1, somewhere in that area. Middle school runs 28, 29 to 1, and high school, it just really depends. There's some classes that are larger, and you get into some of the very specialized specific classes that can be 10, 12, 15 to 1. But yes, that would be without a doubt in consideration. And I would add that the way the state set this up, May 1 is the allocation date for site-based councils on the number of teachers per grade level. And so having that information before May 1 to make that allocation, you would have that information at that point. And so you can adjust that all the way up to September 15th by state law.
I had two questions.
Yes,
I think
sir.
one of them dovetails on Dr. Hudson's question. I wasn't thinking about elementary schools and the number of subjects that each teacher has to manage. But my question was, how tough is it to identify the learning gaps? And so with his question, I mean, I think he's saying it's going to be more hard, it's going to be more difficult for the elementary teachers who are having to do that with multiple different disciplines. I just was thinking in general, how hard is that? And my second question was, my second part of it is related to that also. You mentioned the extra time it's going to take to do teacher development in that skill. How many hours of teacher development is that? You said time, but like 20 hours, 10 hours? I mean, just have a
Good question.
ballpark, you know, kind of question about that.
I mean, initially I was thinking, and I'm really not exaggerating, I was thinking 8 days up front, 8 work days or 10 days where they could have time to really work like we did with Microsoft Teams at the beginning of the pandemic. But, you know, there are other factors to consider too as we look at that. So, I really would love, you know, that would be the upfront ideal amount, and then you'd have some through the year, you know, that you could follow up and check in as we go, because we're going to need to adjust as we go. There's going to be things that come up that are challenges that we need to address. And so then, even 10 days for the whole year would be something we could probably make work. We'd have to figure out, you know, there have to be some other coaching sessions and things we do just embedded into the day somehow. I'm not sure, but that would make it functional, you know, where we would do some of the days up front and spread the rest out so that we could, again, check in with teachers, give them what they need in terms of answering questions, do workshops. You know, our teachers are gonna really want to understand this, and they're gonna work hard in terms of, you know, their number one question is gonna be, what should this look like in my classroom? They want, and the problem is they have limited time in terms of planning for instruction. They don't have time to write curriculum, you know, but they probably do have time to prioritize certain things over others, and then really think through the unit plan on that. Now, to answer your other question, which is back to the elementary, I was going to, maybe it's Dr. Hudson's question, but I do think that at the elementary level, not all subjects are going to require the same amount of work, same amount of time, excuse me. It will all be work, but some of it will take a little longer, I think, certain subjects. It also depends on the grade level. So if you're at, let's say, 5th grade teaching reading, you know, it's a very different challenge than if you're at 1st grade teaching reading and a child has never gone to kindergarten. Okay, so that's a very different challenge. And I do agree with Dr. Hudson that, you know, we need to assess, I mean, what does that look, what kind of support needs to be there? That's part of the reason, because this is so extreme, that's part of the reason why we're interested in hiring these consultants, because they have worked with, you know, hundreds of districts on these types of challenges over the years. They have the research, they know, you know, and they can guide us on, okay, you know, not necessarily that we would have a cookie cutter solution from another district, but they can help us think through the challenge and think what really is the right, you know, kinds of support at the primary level versus intermediate elementary level versus middle school. You know, these are all very different challenges. So these are all great questions, you know, and I think that's why we have to take a collaborative approach. We've really got to get, you know, a lot of people involved in the planning of this, and to engage people around, what's going to work here in our district based on the best practices that we know from research.
Are there other questions from the board for Mr. Black?
Well, I wanted to transition, I think Mr. Brock is going next, but as that's happening, when we think about our children and catch up that's because of learning loss due to COVID, I wanted to have dialogue on what the best calendar is to meet our students' needs. And as Mr. Black just laid out, we also have learning needs for our employees, specifically our teachers and instructional assistants. And so in January, we approved a calendar that looks very traditional. Not this year's calendar. It has us 175 instructional days, 4 holidays that are paid by state law, an opening and closing day, and 6 professional development days. The calendar we're on this year, which meets 1,062 instructional hours, the traditional calendar. The calendar we're on this year is 160 days of instruction. It has the 4 holidays, the opening and closing days, but it has 11 professional development days. And so when you start looking at the balance that we have to do between adult learning that has to take place on the front end and time to catch up, we wanted to talk about the alternative calendar. The calendar committee approved this as kind of a backup calendar in case we were still in a huge pandemic need for next year. And so Mr. Brock is going to present that, but I'm going to ask the question is, what is the best calendar? It doesn't have to be the one we've already approved. It doesn't have to be the one that he's showing you. Here's kind of the other extreme. It could be any possibility or mix of those calendars. I just think we've got to get the instructional year right. And I would hope that we can have dialogue and public dialogue and input for the next month, 6 weeks, to say here's what's best for our children as we go forward. And it might be what we've already approved. And here's how we're going to do this learning needs with our employees, which means we might need to adjust contracts to add additional professional development days on the front end, with what you just laid out. And so I think the dialogue and the discussion is important as we think through the challenges that we have before us to close the gaps in learning and also to support our teachers and our instructional assistants and our administrators in the work that lies ahead of them too. So with that, Mr. Brock, I'm sorry, that's your job. I apologize.
Any other questions for Mr. Black before Mr. Brock presents the other calendar or alternative calendar? Okay. Item 3.2, Troy Brock, Director of Pupil Personnel.
All right, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Trying to get the technology to mirror over to the monitors, and I apologize, that's not up and working, but I did give you a paper copy and a handout of the proposed alternative calendar. As mentioned, we did have a previously approved calendar from back in December, a traditional calendar looking at 187 contract days and a typical 100, I think we approved a 175 instructional day calendar. So going to and piggybacking off of what Will said as far as where do we find the time. The alternative calendar that I'm presenting to you is for your consumption and discussion and any kind of further massaging of that you might want to consider and look at that. That's what we're asking you to do so that we can implement what we believe is the best route for kids. Looking at this, what you can see, and probably right off the bat, what stands out the most is the beginning of the school year. And traditionally, we start around the 9th, 10th, 11th of August. This would use the alternative school legislation, whereby as long as we're getting in 1,062 hours of instruction, then we can put all of that within a whatever time frame that falls into. What this one falls into is a 160-day instructional calendar. Now, yes, that does reduce the number of instructional days, but we're also asking is that the bell schedules of our schools remain what they are for this year, which is 400 instructional minutes. And I have received word I've heard from schools, I've heard from teachers and administrators who said that the 400, it's not so much as the number of days, but they actually can make a difference and you see more gains once we went back to in-person. They see those gains because of the longer day, the longer school day, having 400 minutes. Typically, what we've had, just for reference, is around 375 minutes, so around anywhere from 25 to 30 minute increase from what we traditionally had into an alternative calendar. So again, going back to that August, what you see there are some blue days starting in July 30th through August 12th. It's kind of, these are days that I have to report to ADE. These are not actual days that we would be having teachers in person, receiving some kind of professional development, at least according to what ADE is asking us to present to them. Where the teachers start to come into is on August 13th through the 23rd, right before school starts. So, in going to the legislation, I think maybe explaining the legislation probably will give you some context, is that under the alternative calendar rule, if you start on the Monday closest to August 26th, I believe it is, then you can use the alternative calendar, okay? So under this, with a 160-day instructional calendar, it equates to, for the teacher's contract, 170 days. So they work 160 in your classroom, 400 instructional minutes per day, but the equivalent for their contract is 170 days. So then we add to that the open and close for professional development days and for holidays. That gives us to a 180 days. And so we just have to figure out from that point, where do the other 7 days come in? That's where the August 13th through August 23rd are incorporated into that. So that's the major significant change as we look at the alternative calendar. The other element or item that we put on there was in February. We have a 3-day break that we incorporated in February. You recall this year we had a full week off, had like a winter break. We are suggesting to go with a 3-day break similar to what we have at the Thanksgiving time frame. And so what that would do is that would allow us to end the school year on May 19th and close the schools on the 20th. Teachers' last day would be May 20th. So that is, everything else remains the same. Are there any questions that you all might have about the calendar?
So this would allow at least front-loading of mandated professional development days.
Absolutely.
Which are the purple.
Those purple,
Yeah.
correct. And it would also lead to what Will's talking about, that training, that time we need to train teachers on the model.
Let me add a couple things here. We are asking a lot of teachers to work the month of June for the extended school year, working on those plans now. And so with that, we also, in this calendar, I think one of the options is it does give you more summertime for the extending the school year. It also, on the front end of this, would give you an opportunity, I believe, to jumpstart children coming to school early in certain very specific grade levels that we determine across the district to incorporate what it's like to be in kindergarten potentially, or that transition to high school in 9th grade, et cetera. So I think it does that. It still gives you some summertime if you're a student or if you're an employee. I think those are huge advantages. However, I think that it could be a challenge to get children here in the summer. And so, you start looking at what the calendar that we approved, the traditional one, from a standpoint of an August 10th to August 11th start date, that is longer school year, and it does reduce our summer down, but we have children here captured. And so even to the point that we've had discussions of, and this would require compensation and changing contracts if we went this direction as a district and as a board. But what would you, if you combine those and you had longer school days with the 175 days, would that capture, that extra 25 minutes would create roughly 13, 14 more school days for each child in the district. And so, again, for me, it's just a dialogue of what is best for us to start thinking about, engaging our community on, engaging our faculty and staff relative to the challenges that we see ahead in the future for closing not only COVID gaps, but other achievement gaps in between subgroups that we have in our district.
And for a time frame, just so you know, May 30th is the deadline for board approval of the next year's calendar.
Are there any questions from the board for Mr. Brock regarding the
Not a
alternative calendar?
question, but again, this is just personal opinion. I see you have a professional development day in October.
Yes.
There's no way they can be in September. What I look at, you front loading all this professional development, and you've got kids coming in. To me, sometime in September is a chance to do that pulse check and see what needs to be done, what's not working, rather than sustaining it all the way till October. That's just a personal opinion.
And that day is there for data disaggregation day, so taking those assessment results from this spring, and we'll get that information back from the state that we can present that to the principals and the teachers and so forth, and use that day for, and I will speak better to
Which
that.
day come out?
October 1st.
Dr. Hudson, I would add that we expect to get that back early, but in times and years, it's been delayed before, and so sometimes I think we would expect to have that back mid-September, and when we have data disaggregation day, not only do we look at last year's scores, but we set goals for each child across the district in reading and math from kindergarten up relative to science and social studies and tested areas in writing the same way. And so we are always a little hesitant, even though the goal is to get it back to us early September, to have that disaggregation day, because there's been years it's been delayed due to people not fulfilling their contract to the testing companies. And so I think that's why customarily that ends up there.
Yeah, and I, Troy, if I remember correctly, we have a flex day in September, is that right?
Actually, I think-
September 3rd is listed
Yes,
as a
September 3rd.
professional development flex
Okay.
day.
So there was one in September, Dr. Hudson, and I'd love to talk more. It would be, what you're saying is a temperature check on the implementation of things, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely worth looking at. And the way we operate too, a lot of our temperature check process, a lot of that's coming also in addition to PD days, which are ideal because you can stop, everybody gets a chance to really think through it. We also are taking the pulse in teacher team meetings, also at the same time. So I think the combination of the two would be good. Something to look at.
So what are your next steps going to be regarding the calendar that was approved and this, proposal, which was just one proposal? Are you all going to talk more with the calendar committee as a group and approach us with something else next month, or?
The calendar committee has already reviewed, that's what we did prior to this meeting, is I did submit this to them, and the majority were in favor. There were some comment that basically they were in favor of implementing what we were suggesting.
I think my next steps would be engaging our administrators in each building, also along with our teachers through the union representation, also our classified staff through the union representation, and start working on what that plan is that best meets the needs of our children and our adults from a learning standpoint. And obviously get input back from the Board of Education once you've had a chance to think through that and mull that over. It's new today for you all, but we've been talking about it for a while now, relative to what is best and best meets the needs.
Are there other questions or comments from the board regarding the calendar? Okay. All right. We'll move on to item 3. Thank you, Mr. Brock.
Thank you.
Item 3.3, recognition of staff nominees for the WKCTC Regional Educators Award, and I think Mary Hunter Hancock is handling that portion.
Yes, we are thrilled to be able to recognize those nominees, finalists, and winners. As Dr. Levine said, the West Kentucky Community Technical College Regional Educator Awards that were presented in March. We just wanted to take the time to honor them and acknowledge such an outstanding achievement. So if those of you who are here could come down front, right in front of our board here by Dr. Hudson, that would be awesome. I'm going to go ahead and start with the nominees who weren't able to make it tonight. There's Lydia Tarnowski with Morgan Elementary School. She's a second grade teacher. Karen Smith, the McNabb Elementary School virtual teacher. Michaela Everly, Paducah Middle School technology teacher. Shanita Donaldson, Paducah Middle School 8th grade math teacher. We have Miss Kim Davidson here with us tonight from Morgan Elementary School as a music teacher. And Miss Rachel Castillo from Paducah Tillman High School as an English teacher. We'll continue with our nominees and our finalists. Here tonight is Mr. C.W. Ligon from Paducah Tillman, the head custodian. He was a finalist for the Cornelia Reese Unsung Hero Staff Award. And then our other finalist was Brittany Riley. She couldn't make it tonight. She's from Morgan Elementary School, and she's a technology resource teacher. She was a finalist for the Distinguished Faculty Pre-K through 5th grade award. And our last one present tonight is the nominee and winner, Danette Humphrey, Paducah Middle School GTC teacher, and she won for the Distinguished Faculty 6th through 8th grade award. I also mentioned that Dr. Anton Reese recognized Olivia Burr with a special President's Award to recognize her excellence in leadership and service to education. Burr is a retired lifelong educator and served as the first Family Resource Center coordinator in Paducah and McCracken County. We appreciate our educators and staff throughout the district and know that going above and beyond in a year such as this speaks volumes of your dedication to Paducah Public School students. On behalf of the Board of Education, thank you for all you do. Next year we'll have an award to give, right, Lisa? We're working on that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Did anybody want to say anything?
Thank you.
Do any of you want to say anything?
Sure, I'll say something.
Yeah.
So my son, who's 22, he's student teaching at Tillman, Isaac, came up to me after I received the award, or a couple days later, and he said, "So what'd you win?" And I said, "Well, they gave us this nice little certificate, and they give you a little, I don't know, some glass, little flame-looking etched with your name on it." And he said, "Okay." He said, "Did you get money?" And I said, "No, they just give you just a nice little piece of." Man. He said, "Y'all deserve money, so."
Coming from your son. I got you. All right.
That's all I have for you today.
Yeah. Congratulations, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight, too. I think I'll just make one more special recognition or announcement that's not on the agenda. But there's a baseball game tomorrow night involving the St. Louis Cardinals and the Arizona Diamondbacks. Is that right?
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati Reds and the Arizona Diamondbacks. And it's going to be where?
In Cincinnati.
And who is singing the national anthem?
Gabrielle Copeland.
Gabrielle Copeland, who's Angela and Tony Copeland's daughter, who's a junior at Paducah Tillman High School, will be singing the national anthem. So if you're not a baseball fan, you probably just need to celebrate the national anthem tomorrow night and see if you can find that baseball game. So that's fantastic. The next item on our agenda is, item 4.1, which is an opportunity for oral communications from the audience regarding items which are included on tonight's agenda. If there's anyone here that would like to speak on items which are listed on tonight's agenda, now would be an appropriate time to do so. Hearing none, we'll move on to item 4.2, which is an opportunity for oral communications from the audience regarding items which are not included on tonight's agenda. Hearing none, we'll move on to item 5.0, which is our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve item 5.0?
I'll make a motion we approve the consent agenda, item 5.0.
Is there a second?
I second.
Are there any questions from the board? Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Dr. Okoji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levin?
Yes. Item 6.1, amendment to board policy first reading. The superintendent recommends that the Paducah Board of Education receive for first reading the amendment to board policy 01.1 to include information about student board member representatives. Is there a motion to approve this amendment to board policy?
I'll make a motion we approve item 6.1.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions from the board? So this is a policy that Dr. Okoji had suggested to us a while back to have 2 students from Paducah Tillman High School elected to serve as student representatives to the board. And then also part of that policy would be a superintendent's advisory group, which would involve representatives of all the schools that would work with the superintendent and the 2 representatives from Paducah Tillman to provide input or student voice to the board. Any other board members have any comments about that or questions about it? Okay. Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Dr. Okoji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. LeBoon?
Yes. Item 6.2, amendment to the 2020-2021 school calendar. The superintendent recommends that the Paducah Board of Education approve the following amended days to the 2020-2021 district calendar. And below are the days that would, well, I could go ahead and read them. August 24th to 26th from regular instruction to NTI. November 6th to 30th from regular instruction to NTI. December 1st to the 28th from regular instruction to NTI. January 6th, 13th, 20th, and 27th from regular instruction to NTI. February 3rd, 10th through 12th, and 24th through 26th from regular instruction to NTI. March 3rd, 10th, 17th, and 24th from regular instruction to NTI. March 12th from non-instructional day to regular instructional day. And May 19th would be the last day for students, which would be all in person. And May 20th from regular instruction day to closing day. Is there a motion to approve item 6.2?
I make a motion to approve item 6.2.
Is there a second?
A second.
There's a motion and a second. Are there any questions from the board? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Okoji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. LeBoon?
Yes. Item 6.3, new position, Chief Equity Officer. The superintendent recommends that the Paducah Board of Education approve the new position and job description of a District Chief Equity Officer. Is there a motion to approve item 6.3?
I'll make a motion we approve item 6.3, the new position for the Chief Equity Officer.
Is there a second?
A second.
There's a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments from the board? I think some of this was already discussed by the Assistant Superintendent and Dr. Shively. If there's no questions from the board, call the roll, please.
Dr. Okoji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. LeBoon?
Yes. Item 6.4, new position, District Instructional Coach. The superintendent recommends that the Paducah Board of Education approve the new position and job description of a District Instructional Coach. Is there a motion to approve item 6.4?
I make a motion to approve item 6.4.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
A second.
And there's a second. Are there any questions or comments from the board? I think one comment to note earlier is I think Dr. Hudson had some concern that this may be too big a job for one person, including, considering all the levels, high school on down. But are there any other questions or comments from the board?
Dr. Lubin, I just want to clarify that the instructional specialist would also be a coach, but they would be kind of leading the team as they go through different buildings. So I just wanted to clarify that there are actually two
Positions.
coaches, plus the equity officer would also serve as part of that team.
Gotcha.
With a special lens toward equity. All of them would be people who could give feedback, based on best practice.
Gotcha. Any other questions or comments from the board? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Koji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levine?
Yes. Item 6.5, new position, District Instructional Specialist. The superintendent recommends that the Paducah Board of Education approve the new position and job description of the District Instructional Specialist, as was described previously. Is there a motion to approve item 6.5?
I'll make a motion, we approve item 6.5, the new position for District Instructional Specialist.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Are there any questions from the board? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Koji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levine?
Yes. Item 6.6, new position, CWTP Employment Specialist. The superintendent recommends that the Paducah Board of Education approve the new position and job description of the Community Work Transition Program, CWTP Employment Specialist. Is there a motion to approve item 6.6?
I'll make a motion, we approve item 6.6.
Is there a second? Sorry.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. Are there any questions from the board?
What exactly is this person going to do?
Focus on our transitions for our students that have an IEP, that are
Okay.
Paducah High School students. Customarily, it's a grant position where you get funded per hour for that. Customarily, we've outsourced that to Easter Seals, which is has been a good relationship, but we're not serving our children that are in the collaborative model that are taking classes for credit. We are serving children that are in the abilities classroom that usually get a certificate of attendance, and so it will better help us transition students with that focus to college, to the workforce that have an IEP. So Ms. Tooley's here to that. Okay.
Are there any other questions from the board? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Koji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levine?
Yes. Item 6.7, agreement with PCG/University Instructors, LLC. The superintendent recommends that the Paducah Board of Education approve the agreement for a pilot program with Public Consulting Group Incorporated, PCG/University Instructors, LLC, to provide sourcing, recruitment, pre-screening for certification for instructional positions to help support student achievement. Is there a motion to approve this agreement?
I'll make a motion that we approve item 6.7, the agreement with PCG University Instructors, LLC.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Are there any questions from the board or comments from the superintendent?
Yeah, can the superintendent give us more light on this?
Yes, sir. And Mr. Black and I have been in conversations with this group since January, I believe. Dr. Tucker Woods, who's the Chief Equity Officer of Kentucky Department of Education, is the one that suggested that we start conversations with this group. And so it is a profile of potential teachers that we will need district-wide that will help us recruit our larger area than we are able to hit with our efforts where we attend job fairs for administrators and district leadership attend specific job fairs. And so in this specific contract, it is funded out of the ESSER 2 funds. We have it listed as a pilot to see how it works. And there is a 18%, I believe, on the front end of the contract that is due if they present candidates that our school-based decision-making councils end up hiring. They support those candidates through their first year, help transition them to Paducah with us, and specifically have had a lot of success in helping districts, Nashville, Atlanta, diversify their teaching staff. And so I think it's a great opportunity for us to try this, again, with monies from the ESSER 2 grant, looking primarily at two high school teachers, 2 middle school, and 1 elementary. But again, site-based councils, the school-based councils have to end up hiring that person.
Will it help us with hiring minority teachers?
That's the conversation we directly had with them on here's what we're looking for, very specifically to diversify our faculty and staff. Yes, sir. So that's,
And I will mention that this is in addition to what our local district recruitment team has been doing in terms of reaching out, networking, attending job fairs, although job fairs are often virtual this year, some of them have been. Teresa Span has been heading that up, as well as a variety of other staff diversity committee members, So this is in addition to that, and it's just a pilot to see, based on the recommendation of that chief, KE, chief equity officer.
Are there other questions from the board? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Koji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levin?
Yes. Item 6.8, agreement with Jobs for America graduates, or the JAG program. The superintendent recommends that the Paducah Board of Education approve the memorandum of understanding with Job for America's graduates at Paducah Tillman High School. A JAG grant of $40,000 will cover the salary of a certified instructor. Is there a motion to approve item 6.8?
I'll make a motion we approve item 6.8.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second. Motion and a second. Are there questions from the
Yes.
board?
I was thinking some of these barriers, they have to be 6 of them, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you believe that you'll be able to find 50 students that will hit all 6 barriers?
Yes, sir.
Six of them.
We had this grant about 5 years ago, and it ended up transitioning with an employee that left the district, and so this is not, this is very specific to Paducah Tillman High School, and Ms. Stieg has already been working with the counselors to identify which students would meet all 6 of those barriers, and so they believe, without a doubt, that there's those students. I've even asked the JAG director for the state of Kentucky, is there an opportunity for us as we go forward to put this mentoring program, is what this is a mentoring program in our middle school, potentially, because when we had it before, the employee was at the middle school half a day, the high school half a day. And so, yes, we definitely believe that there's more than that many children. And I would add that last year in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, the JAG seniors that were mentored had a 100% graduation rate and a 90% successful transition rate to, which is measured by, you go directly into the workforce, and we follow them for a year, or they go directly to the military, or they transition to college. And so I'm excited about this and the very specific mentoring pieces for students that we are identifying going forward, and hopefully we can expand that to reach our middle school too in the future.
Are there other questions from the board? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Koji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levin?
Yes. Item 6.9, change order number 5, BG 20-166. The superintendent recommends that the Paducah Board of Education approve change order number 5 for the art building renovation project, the multipurpose athletic facility. This change order will increase the project $462. It will add a rubber wall base to room 110 for $820 and a credit for the deletion of the gas regulator and pressure gauge in the amount of $358.05. Is there a motion to approve change order number 5?
I'll make a motion we approve change order number 5 for the art building renovation project.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Are there questions from the board? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Koji?
Yes.
Ms. Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levin?
Yes. Item 6.1, payments to contractors, BG 20-166. The superintendent recommends that the Paducah Board of Education approve the following payments to contractors for the art building renovation project, multipurpose athletic facility. This is a payment to Ray Black & Sons, and also direct purchase orders to Cape Electric, Ferguson Enterprises, Architectural Sales, and a payment to JRA Architects. Is there a motion to approve item 6.1?
I'll make a motion, we approve item 6.1, payment to contractors for the art building renovation project.
How about we approve 6.1?
Oh,
6.10.
excuse me.
Yeah, I said 6.1, 6.10. I misspoke when I read it originally. Thank you. So there's a motion to approve item 6.10. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Are there any questions from the board?
Can I add that substantial completion date for the Innovation Hub is May 22. So we're getting very close. So we're excited about that. You've seen the work out front. So.
Excellent. If there's no questions from the board, call the roll, please.
Dr. Koji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levin?
Yes. Item 6.11, payment to contractors, BG 20-236. Superintendent recommends that the Paducah Board of Education approve the payments to contractors for the Paducah Head Start project, which is BG 20-236 as outlined below. That's a payment to Bacon Farmer Workman Engineering for $16,250 and for $3,790. Is there a motion from the board for to approve item 6.11?
I'll make a motion to approve item 6.11.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Are there any questions from the board? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Koji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levin?
Yes. Item 6.12, payments to contractors, BG 17-179. The superintendent recommends that the Paducah Board of Education approve the payments to contractors for the Innovation Hub, BG 17-179. As outlined below, that's a payment to Ray Black & Son, to JRA Architects, and to Bacon Farmer Workman Engineering. Is there a motion from the board to approve item 6.12?
I make a motion we approve item 6.12, payment to contractors.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Are there any questions from the board? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Koji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levin?
Yes. I believe we have need to go into executive session regarding personnel, property, and litigation. Is there a motion from the board to go into executive session?
I make a motion to come to executive session.
Motion from Dr. Hudson. Is there a second?
A second.
Second from Dr. Okoji. Are there any questions from the board? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Koji?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Yes.
Dr. Levin?
Yes. Thank you for coming,
Thank you.
everybody. Tell Gabby to break a leg.
Sorry.
Yeah.